welcome to the Roberts Law Office Injury Podcast. Kentucky attorney Jeff Roberts has over 25 years of experience. He'll provide answers to your questions related to personal injury and automobile accidents, workers' compensation claims, and Social Security disability benefits. Let's join Jeff for this episode. And friends, welcome back. We're back in Murray, Kentucky, down at Calloway County with injury attorney Jeff Roberts. And Jeff, it is summertime. I'm glad to see everything finally breaking loose. But that means we need to do a little bit of discussions about things that are going to happen on the road, especially as people are heading out to the lakes and just the people are going to be distracted. And this is an area that you live in. This is an area you deal with on a day-to-day basis. But there's a lot of tourist traffic coming through here, and it just gets a little squirrely when people are pulling boats and other things for the first time, and it kind of causes a problem on the roadway. So let's talk about this.
Sure, Jim. How are you today?
Well, I'm doing great. I love coming down to Murray. I mean, you and I both went to Murray State, and it's just a beautiful area. I was coming in over the lakes today, and I'm just looking around going, man, I kind of miss. We used to go down to Wildcat Beach and all that. We'd have a fun time down there in the summer. But this whole area is just gorgeous. But again, it's a big tourist area, actually.
It is, and you know the traffic on the roadway changes around here in the summertime.
Absolutely.
You know, late spring, summer, and early fall. With the Kentucky Lake, Barkley Lake, both being here, both great locations to vacation, or if you live here to go spend the weekend, go camping up there. LBL is a great place to go hiking. And so we get a lot of outside people coming into this area for those activities, as well as people who live here who go up there. And you know, people pulling boats, as you mentioned, or pulling campers or driving RVs on the roadway. And some of them may not be as familiar with with some of the roads and where they're supposed to be going. And frankly, sadly, I've seen people going down the interstate, pulling a boat or a camper in the left lane, and then try to cut across because they didn't know where their exit was, and not pay any attention when they do so, and try to cut off to reach an exit because they were where they needed to be getting off at. And so, traffic can be a little bit more dangerous with when you have drivers out there who aren't exactly sure where they're going, and they make kind of moves that can be very dangerous at times.
Well, and I think, especially, because we're so close to the lakes, you've got a lot of new boat owners who may be pulling a trailer, not really used to it as much, and so you tend to see them cutting a corner, maybe as you're going around, so that trailer kind of comes over the yellow line, and there's a lot of issues that kind of come up. If you're a driver, you just got to be aware, especially if you're a motorcyclist. We did not too long ago, we did a whole episode on motorcycle safety tips, which we do every year. But again, you've got to be very aware of what's going on because the other driver may be just a little bit more inexperienced than you are.
Absolutely. And even somewhat experienced drivers at times. One of the things that I do see this time of the year is at least people calling me about rear-end collisions because someone driving pulling a boat or pulling a camper, and your stopping distance changes at that point in time. And if you're not used to that, if you've never done it before and you're not aware of that, or if it's been a while since you've pulled and you're thinking, okay, got plenty of time to stop my pickup truck between here and there, but now you're pulling a heavy camper, that's going to make it harder for you to stop. And I've had several people over my career who've been rear-ended from people pulling a trailer of some sort, and not just misjudge how long it's going to take them to stop, either because they weren't paying attention like they should, or because they just forgot that the trailer, or didn't realize the trailer was going to make their stopping distance longer than what they're used to.
You got an extra 1,500 to 2,000 pounds behind you. Yeah, it has an impact.
It does. And if you're on a motorcycle, you don't need to be rear-ended.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
The other issue is you have a lot of people out there right now who might rent RVs. You see all these little, situations where, hey, come rent this RV for the weekend or go on a trip. And if you've never actually spent a lot of time driving an RV, it's a whole different environment. And again, you're going to have an inexperienced driver there that can be a road hazard, so to speak.
Absolutely, and what I've seen as well from that is you have people who are inexperienced on those, and I know they rent them. And I've never driven an RV.
That's one of the main reasons I haven't. It's just because I don't think I really want the liability right now.
Yeah, I can. To me, renting an RV, I would assume that the insurance requirements on those are going to be pretty high because you're letting people who've never driven that drive something. I mean, if you're driving a semi, you have to have the CDL before you can ever get behind the wheel, and you've got to go take the test to make sure you know how to drive that. Yeah, and I don't think the same applies to an RV. I'm comfortable it doesn't apply to an RV, and so it just doesn't make any sense to me, but that's what occurs, and people do rent those from there. And again, and I've represented people who've been in RVs that got hit because of, they don't realize RVs they don't pick up the same speed that a car does.
Yeah.
And so when they get out on the roadway and somebody comes out, and that RV is not going to get up to speed on a highway as fast, or even on a 4-lane that's not an interstate type or parkway type highway. It's not going to gain the speed, and people come up on them awful fast at times without realizing they're going to have to get over, and then they get trapped and end up rear-ending or sideswiping the other car because they're trying to come around and they don't have enough room.
Well, all the way back in episode 20, this was some time ago actually, we did an episode called Safe Driving Tips Around Tractor Trailers. And that actually might be a pretty good episode to go back and listen to. And I'll put a link in the show notes so that you just click on it and go all the way back there. But you can still find it on Jeff's website, jeffrobertslaw.com. Just go to the media tab, drop down on podcast. You can go find episode 20. But again, like an RV, Jeff, that's great that you said that, because as you start to either come from a complete stop, or maybe even when you're just going up a hill, just like a tractor trailer, they take a while to really build up speed and maintain that speed. And an inexperienced driver is not going to be as good at that. And if you're not anticipating that, you might find yourself in a bad situation much more quickly than you ever thought.
Yes, absolutely. And a lot of this comes back to we had the motorcycle safety tips. We had the safety tips around there, and I like to, frankly, I prefer to see fewer wrecks occur out there. The reason I have these safety tips podcasts from that, and it's the same here. If you're coming up on an RV, realize they're not going to be gaining the speed. Pay close attention to that. Or it doesn't have to be an RV. It can be a truck pulling a large boat or a camper. Any of that, they're not going to be doing that. And then in Western Kentucky, where I live at this time of the year, you've got a lot of farm equipment getting out on the roadways at this point, in the tractors and the sprayers and all of that equipment, planters, etc., aren't going to be going highway speed. So you can top a hill, and then there'll be a tractor in front of you that's not going anywhere near 55 miles an hour. And so you've got to be ready and be paying attention and when you're driving, and to be careful of that situation, because I don't want to see anybody running into a tractor. I've represented several farmers who've got injured because people weren't paying attention and rear-ended a tractor when they were going down the roadway. And so, be very careful, especially this time of the year, and look out for the farmers and make sure you give them wide berth.
Well, and that's, nobody wants to cause an accident. A lot of times it's just, hey, look, I'm doing the best I can under the circumstances. And you can't really travel at high speeds when you're pulling, large farm implements behind you. I mean, you just can't do it. And I've seen a lot of guys try to pull off the side of the road or kind of get over as much as possible. But sometimes whatever they're pulling is just wide enough that it's really challenging. And
Exactly.
You've got to give them a lot of distance, and you've got to be real careful. Use your signals when you're going around and let them know. Just all these safe driving techniques that we learned when we were young. that just over time we kind of probably forget about. But especially this time of year, like you said, with farm implements, it is a serious thing that both of you are communicating just a little bit so that nobody gets surprised.
Exactly. I mean, some of the equipment nowadays is so wide that it's, they will get as far over. I know a lot of farmers and friends with a lot of farmers, and they will do their absolute best to get as far off the road as they can potentially get off the road if they're extending past their lane to give you as much room as possible. Frankly, my policy is if when I'm driving, if there's a road or driveway or something like that on my side that I can pull in and just let them come on by, I will do that because and they'll get off the road. But if I'm pulled off and stopped as far over as I can pull off and stop when I'm coming to them, and they can maneuver past me. At that point, and everybody's happy and going on their way after that, and it takes me just a few extra
Absolutely.
seconds to do that, and it avoids anybody being having any problems or getting injured or property damage. And frankly, even if you're not injured, I don't want to damage a tractor, and I don't want my vehicle damaged by a tractor or a piece of equipment in that regard.
Well, let me ask you this: if a farmer's pulling a big piece of equipment, it could be anything that and you run up and you rear end them, you're probably going to be liable, right? I mean, even though it's an oversized load, even though it's moving less than the posted rate of speed, often most of the time, if you're going to rear end somebody, you're probably assumed to be at fault.
Tractor, farm equipment in Kentucky, unless they've changed it recently, and I've not heard anything about the change, and I think I would have, farm equipment being maneuvered around is exempt from some of the rules for oversized and slow-moving loads. From that, as a practical matter, I would advise all farmers to have, if you're going slow, have somebody behind you with their flashers on to warn if you're oversized. Have somebody in front for that, even though the law may not require it. Good safety sense says let's do that.
It's just prudent if you can do it.
It's just good. It's good measure to do that from that standpoint. And I think it comes into play even if there's not a legal requirement to do that on their part. If they're still over the center line, I think there's an argument to be made that it doesn't matter what you're driving. One driver has one lane, the other driver has the other lane. If you're impeding into that other lane, and you cause a wreck, you're still at fault, even if you're not at fault for not having a lead vehicle or a follow vehicle. You could still potentially be found at fault if you're a farmer doing that. So it's good from that standpoint to help protect if an accident is, because you can say, look, I gave them warning and they didn't. They knew we were oversized and still come and hit the side of our vehicle. So
yeah, and it's like we've talked in the past. Regardless of how much insurance is out there and how much money you might get from the lawsuit, it's still, if you've been banged up, injured, maybe you've lost a limb or even worse. That money doesn't mean as much. I mean, it's still, you'd prefer to have never gotten into the wreck, never gotten into the collision in the first place. And that's why an episode like this, that really kind of reminds everybody that, hey, slow down a little bit and understand we're all just trying to get to where we're going, and let's do it safely, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You would be hard-pressed to find anybody who's been injured and recovered money for their injuries that would go back and say, yeah, I would do it all over again for this same amount, for this amount of money.
Yeah.
If you got them choice, okay, you can keep this money and go through it, or we can turn back time and you never be injured and your quality of life never be damaged. Most are going to say, let's go back in time and change it. Because not most of the vast majority, and everyone I've represented, I suspect, would say that. So.
Yeah. And friends, I forgot to mention this while we were talking about it, but we talked about motorcycle tips. We did publish episode 75, which, again, you can find on Jeff's website. You can find it out on Spotify. You can find it at iHeartRadio, a lot of other places, motorcycles tips and advice. And we try to do that announcement at the beginning of the motorcycle season each year, to really just kind of help the motorcyclists think about, okay, wait a minute, the equipment's I haven't been on it in a while. Here's some things I need to do to kind of get ready to get road worthy and all that stuff. But we also talk to the other drivers on the roadway. So again, if you go back to the show notes, you'll be able to find episode 75 on this particular episode, or just go ahead and, like I said, go out to Spotify or somewhere else and take a look at it. And eventually, it'll be up on YouTube as well for the YouTube podcast. But Jeff, this is a great time of year to be in Western Kentucky. I mean, it really is. I mean, we've got, as we talked about, we've got Lake Barkley, we've got Kentucky Lake. Over toward the central part of the state, we've got Lake Cumberland, we've got Lake Malone. As you come down here, there's a lot of great things to do while you're out and about. But again, you just got to be careful, because again, sometimes when people are out there having a good time on the water or getting away for the weekend, might be some alcoholic beverages involved and some other things that kind of cause a problem. And again, people are not thinking as clearly as they should. And we've actually had a couple of episodes talking about drunk driver accidents. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, don't do it.
Yeah, quite frankly.
That's but you are absolutely correct. You will have at this time of the year, especially up around the lakes, you have people going up there on boats or on beaches or campgrounds or whatever, and partaking of alcoholic beverages, which is certainly legal to partake of alcoholic beverages in the proper circumstance, but don't get behind a vehicle if you have been drinking at all. I've heard a lot of people say, well, I can have one or two beers and not be over the legal limit, and that may be true, but why run that risk, number one? Number two, in my opinion, one or two beers, your reaction time is still going to be affected. You may not be over the legal limit, so you may not get the DUI, but your reaction time could be affected, and it would certainly could play a factor in having a wreck. So just make sure you have a designated driver with you, and. As I think I've mentioned before, in my career, I've been a prosecutor as well as having my private practice. Still do that to a very limited extent, but I've prosecuted for DUI several designated drivers. Never have understood the process of someone saying, okay, I'm going to be the designated driver tonight. I'm just going to have one drink or two drinks. And I've had one say, well, I just had one Long Island iced tea. And he's like, do you know how much alcohol is in a Long Island iced tea?
First question, how big's the cup?
Exactly. And, the person was well over the legal limit. And, it just, if have a designated driver, and that designated driver doesn't need to drink anything. And if they are, when my daughter was little, and even now, I will tell her, if you're out and if you've been drinking and the driver who's supposed to be the designated driver has been drinking, don't get in the vehicle with them. Find another way home. Call somebody. Call a friend. Told my daughter, call me, and we'll get you. You can find somebody that's sober that'll get you home. And even if you can't, you're better off staying there for a little bit longer than riding with someone who's been drinking.
Absolutely. And friends, I know I keep harping on this, but if you go back to the website and look for episode 46, that is an entire episode dedicated to car wrecks involving negligent drunk drivers. But, Jeff, you made an interesting point. Somebody might say, well, I can drink one or two and still be under the limit and I'll be okay. But again, it is that reaction time. So now factor in the fact that you've got a boat and a trailer behind you, or you've got an RV, or maybe you're pulling some jet skis or something like that. You're just asking for a problem to happen. And it's not worth it to you. It's not worth it to your family and your passengers. And it's certainly not worth it to the other drivers on the road.
Absolutely, it is not worth it at all. And when you mentioned the boat, pulling the boats in it, we hadn't actually discussed this part of it. But if you're on the lake driving a boat, don't be drinking and driving a boat or a jet ski or any of that on there. I've represented people who've been injured on the water where somebody was drunk operating a boat and run into a fishing boat and cause injuries. And so you can you can get a DUI for operating out on that water. You can get in trouble for doing that, and even worse, you can cause injury or potentially death to somebody else if you're out operating on the water under the influence. So don't do that either.
Yeah, I can think back to my college days and a few years after college days. We used to go down to Eddy Creek a lot, and we did a lot of water skiing down there. And I can remember being in the water. And again, you're hard to see, when you've just got the tips of your skis out and maybe your life jacket on. But you've got a very low profile there, especially if there's any waves whatsoever. And if you just hope the boats around you are not inebriated, the drinkers anyway, or the drivers are not drinking. It's a dangerous situation. Have fun. I mean, that's what summer's about. Have fun on the lakes, have a good time, but be responsible. Be a responsible driver, be a responsible boater. And let me point out, just to clarify, because I know this is, we've used the term DUI and DWI and all this throughout the episode. Jeff does not represent DUI cases. Jeff does not. If you're in trouble, Jeff is not the attorney to call. But if you've been injured by someone who might have been drinking and driving, then that's a good time to call him. But a lot of times people hear this and they're not really paying attention, and they think, "Oh, I'll just call Jeff." That's not necessarily the kind of case you want to take.
I do not handle any criminal defense at all. I'm still affiliated with the county attorney's office, so ethically I cannot handle any of those. If anybody calls my office for that type, they're told Jeff does not handle those. I'm not cut out to handle those anyway. I never have handled those in my career. It's just not something I can do. And so we refer those, or tell them, we don't refer them, but tell them to call somebody else if they call here for that. So if you call here asking about me representing you in a criminal matter, you're just wasting a phone call.
Yeah. But if you've been injured by someone, I mean, again, that you handle personal injury, which is usually going to be a car wreck, a truck wreck, a motorcycle accident. You do a lot of workers' comp. You do a tremendous amount of workers' comp and also Social Security disability. So
correct.
If it's those types of injuries, that's fine. And sometimes, unfortunately, those do involve alcohol situations where the other driver was negligent. The at-fault driver was negligent due to maybe drinking and driving.
I've represented several people who've been seriously injured.
Yeah, we've talked about some of those. Yeah, it's horrible.
Yeah, and because the other operator was drinking, and that just accidents are going to happen. But choosing to drink and then get behind the wheel, you know that's going to be cause injuries at some point in time if you do it enough. You might get lucky a time or two, but you're eventually going to be in a wreck if you do that, and you just don't do it. It's just not. It's not good practice. No,
some of the situations, unfortunately, could be tragic. We've done episodes on traffic fatalities, and it's just I would hate to wake up from a night out partying and realize, oh my gosh, things really got out of hand last night, and now I've actually taken somebody's life because of that. I couldn't imagine what that feels like. I don't ever want to know.
Yeah, I don't ever want to know. Unfortunately, I've talked to families that have faced that. Yeah. Where their loved one has been taken from them for that. And in Kentucky, if you are intoxicated behind the wheel and you cause a fatality or serious physical injury, it's not just a DUI at that point. It's not a misdemeanor charge. It becomes a felony charge, and you could be doing a lot of jail time. We've had some in Calloway County where the person died, and if I'm not mistaken, I think they got more than 20 years because they were DUI when they hit a pedestrian, and so you don't want you don't want to do that. You don't want to injure somebody or kill somebody, and you don't want to spend the next 10 plus years in a penitentiary either.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be waving past you when I'm down. If you're down in Eddyville, I'll wave past you as I boat by. But other than that, I could imagine. Yeah. But again, we don't want to in this episode on a damper. It's just this is summertime, and it's a great time to get outdoors. Winter is I get cabin fever during the winter time, and I'm just glad to see all the leaves out. I'm glad to see people kind of loosening up a little bit, and it's going to be a lot of fun. But again, an episode like this just to remind you, hey, look, there are some inexperienced drivers out there. And you need to take your time around them. You need to kind of, remember all those safety driving tips that you learned when you were trying to study for your license and things like that. And for some of us, it's been a few years. But, again, you've got other people out there. They're distracted. They're probably under a lot of pressure trying to pull the boat for the first time, or maybe drive that RV for the first time, and just they're people are wound up, and accidents are going to happen. But just be careful. Jeff, we've got a few more minutes here. Let's talk about if you are in an accident, in some type of motor vehicle collision out here on the roadway. Are there just some very basic tips that they ought to think about at that time? Because again, you're not planning to be in an accident. Suddenly you are. Let's walk through. There's probably 2 or 3 things they might want to think about, as long as they're safe and they're not being rushed to a hospital. If they're possible, maybe it's just a fender bender or something like that. What should somebody do?
If you are in an accident, because frankly, it doesn't matter if the other driver is drunk. It doesn't matter how negligent the other driver was. Their insurance company is going to look at everything and do their best to try to blame a different driver for causing the collision. That's a given that's going to occur. So if you are injured, if you're involved in an accident, if your injuries aren't so severe that prohibit you from doing this, then try to take photographs. If you've got your phone with you, take photographs of your car, their car, the scene. Maybe if you got the ability to video it, maybe switch it to video and walk around a little bit to show the scene and where vehicles are and where the debris is on the roadway, etc. From that, if you obviously make sure somebody calls the police to come out. If you are injured, then let the police officer know. If you aren't sure if you are or not injured, then stay in your vehicle unless there's a fire or something of that nature. Stay in your vehicle, and because some injuries, if you get out and move around, you can actually cause them to be worse. So stay there in that setting and let the officer know to get an ambulance out there. Or if somebody calls and said, "I'm going to call 911 if you're hurt," tell them to get an ambulance here as well. The sooner it gets there, the quicker you get medical care. From that perspective. So if the other driver comes up and says, "Look, I'm sorry, I didn't see, the light. I thought I was going to make it under yellow or whatever, and it turned red," make a note of that so you can tell the officer that he admitted to me he ran the red light type situation, and seek medical care. If you have an injury, seek medical care. If you don't go to the emergency room, then a lot of times you don't realize that you're injured at the scene because your adrenaline is pumping, and frankly, you're concerned about everybody else in your vehicle and all. And later on, a few hours later, you start feeling the pain coming on when the adrenaline's out of your system. And if that's the case, go to the emergency room or go to urgent care and get yourself looked at. Let them know you were involved in a wreck and that the pain's kind of come on gradually since then or whatever. But get it documented. And if you don't have health insurance, don't worry, because if it's in Kentucky and you're living in Kentucky, you've got the PIP coverage on your vehicle, which we've talked about multiple times. You can find other episodes where we discussed that. That will cover up to $10,000, potentially greater, or cover minimum $10,000, potentially greater than $10,000, depending on your insurance coverage. There, if you have health insurance, let your health insurance take care of the bill to start with. But get checked out. The sooner you get treatment, the better chance of a better recovery if you do that.
That makes sense because they don't have the time to really blame it on something else. Well, maybe you did something else to actually cause the injury, and you're just trying to blame it on the car wreck. So again, as soon as you feel that onset of pain, it's a good idea to go at least get checked out and get it documented. In episode 65, we did a full episode on questions about a motor vehicle claim, and we talked about who's going to pay your medical bills. What happens if I'm off work due to an injury. All those different things that are in there, and we talk a little bit about PIP, and there are some other links that'll take you over to previous episodes where we've really kind of dissected the different types of insurance coverage and things like that. So hopefully you'll find not only this podcast but that podcast really, really helpful in terms of just understanding why you need to take a few actions. One thing I thought was really interesting that you brought up a while back in a previous episode: don't move the debris. That's evidence. And some people, well, I'm just trying to clear the road so the cars can get by. That's not your job. And in fact, take some photos and things like that, because you're going to be able to infer from where that debris is laying on the roadway, maybe what happened. And that may actually support your claim that, hey, the other driver was negligent. And that's important. Don't mess with the debris.
Correct. Exactly. The accident reconstructionist will utilize where the debris is located to help pinpoint exactly where the collision occurred, which lane of travel that the collision occurred in. So don't move anything around from that. Let the police get there, but take photos of it if you are capable of doing so, or if you got a friend who's in the vehicle with you that didn't get hurt, have them take photos of it. Police should take photos of it as well before anything starts getting moved around. But when the wreckers show up and all of that, sometimes things get moved when they're hooking up, and also the earlier you can get the photos taken, the better off you are.
Right, and I guess that goes for bruises and cuts and scrapes as well, because again, those tend to heal, and if it takes a while to settle your claim, again, it's going to look a lot better, several weeks from now than it does, the next few days right immediately following the collision. You don't want to, if it's really bad, go get medical treatment. But again, if you can take some photos, that just substantiates the damage, because down the road you may not look as banged up as you actually were when the accident occurred.
Absolutely. And taking the photos will document. Taking photos of your cuts, bruises, etc., will document the injuries better than just the medical record saying he had an abrasion on his arm. It doesn't say that it covered, from the wrist all the way up to the above the elbow was black and blue. So photos help to show that much better. And so all of that documentation helps to establish the extent of your injuries if you choose to pursue a claim.
That makes sense. Well, Jeff, that's pretty much a wrap for today's discussion. I do appreciate your time, and once again, this is just a great time of year. Everybody's been itching to get out. I know I am. I got the kayak out this past weekend, and I'm looking forward to get back on the water as soon as I can. So I hope you have a great summer. I hope you enjoy yourself, and for everybody else out there listening, do have a wonderful time. This is a beautiful state. We're very blessed to have a state like this with all the things that we have to do here. Just be careful, be courteous of the other drivers around you, and just be prepared, because some other people just aren't thinking about it. They're distracted or whatever. This is a good time to basically just take a deep breath and enjoy the weekend or the vacation time for what it's worth, but get home safely. Jeff, if somebody unfortunately does get into a situation and they need to contact you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Best way to contact me is to call my office. The office number is 270-753-0053, or you can call the 800 number, 1-800-844-5108. Rings to the exact same phone. But whichever you prefer, you can call, and we'll be happy to talk with you.
Outstanding. Jeff, once again, thanks for your time. We'll see you in about 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to the Roberts Law Office Injury Podcast. Jeff will return in 2 weeks. Until then, he invites you to visit jeffrobertslaw.com and follow his firm on Facebook. At the Roberts Law Office, you'll find a history of small town service and big city results.